There are certain things that we do wrong, particularly in the field of Avodah Zarah, where we do something very wrong and we deal with that. But there's something even worse than doing something wrong, and that is taking something right and distorting it and turning it into something wrong. Taking something true and distorting it into something that is false. On Avodah Zarah, Daf Yomi, we'll talk about corrupting holiness, where בעינא כעין פנים, defiling that which is holy. What does that mean, and what does that look like? We have a posuk. This is a bit of Daf Nun and a bit of Daf Nun Aleph. We have a posuk in Shemot of Zover le'Elohim Yocharam. One who brings sacrifices to idols will be killed, but it's an interesting word that's used, Yocharam, from the word of cherem. And when cherem is used in the Torah, it doesn't mean putting somebody in cherem, isolating somebody, although it means that as well. Mostly when cherem is used, the object is isolated because it's dedicated to Hashem. It's a kind of a hekdesh. Here it means this person will be killed. Bilti Hashem levado, only to Hashem may sacrifices be made. We're introduced here to the idea of tikrovet avodas kechavim. Tikrovet avodas kechavim is an item used in the service of an idol. So we've been talking about an idol, and that there's this powerful destructive energy in idolatry, and it even attaches to the objects of idolatry and the effect that has in the world, and why we need to destroy that. Here there's an idea of tikrovet avodat kechavim, where you use an item in the service of avodas kechavim. And there are two interesting things about it. We go back to yesterday's case. If you remember that the King Yanai's palace was destroyed, they used stones for markulis, and then they used the stones to pave the way. Some people walked on the way that was paved with these markulis stones, some people didn't. And the Gemara goes into that. My time a demand a parish. So those that didn't use the road, why didn't they use the road? Surely this is bitul avodah zarah, even though these stones were once used for markulis. You remember markulis is a peculiar type of avodah zarah, where one of those idol worshippers would have encountered a few stones. You know, he might have had 3 stones with one on top. It looks like a bit of a structure, and he would have said, this is an idol. These stones don't just happen to be here. This has some spiritual force. And he adds stones to the pile. That's the way one serves markulis, is by adding stones to the pile. So these stones were used for markulis, but now the markulis is destroyed and they're used to pave a road. What greater bitul, what greater nullification of the avodah zarah is there than to use it to pave the road? Why did they not walk on the road? These stones are not just avodas kechavim, they are tikroves avodas kechavim. They've been used in the service of avodah zarah. And we have a din that if they've been used in the service, if it's a tikrovet avodah zarah, ein la betela le'olam, you cannot undo the avodah zarah. Which is a fascinating idea. That means the idol itself you can undo. You can remove the ruach hatumah from an idol. This negative force you can remove from an idol. But an object used in service of the idol, you can never remove the negative force of that. Very interesting idea. And so even though they're now being used to pave the stones, these people decided not to use it. Shemar brings a posuk. Umandalor parish, the Gemara goes on to say, and so then what about the people who used the road? What do they believe? Omar בעינא כעין פנים ולקה. There's a particular law attached to this din, the tikrovet avodas kechavim, ein la betela le'olam, that an object used in service of idolatry can never be nullified. That is, provided that the way the object is used in service has a similarity, an equivalence to a service that took place in our own Beis HaMikdash. That's an interesting idea. So 2 interesting ideas. The one is tikroves is more serious than the avodah zarah itself, that there is more severity attached to the object of service than to the idol itself. And secondly, that's provided that there is some equivalence between the way the idol was served with this object and how service was done in the Beis HaMikdash. And our Sugya and Daf Yomi goes into this in all sorts of fascinating ways. One of them briefly, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravu, Amar Rav, Avodat Kochavim she'ovdim ota b'makel. Imagine there's a particular idol whose service is with a stick. You bang on the drum with a stick, you bang on a rock with a stick, you make a noise with a stick, you use a stick in the service of that idol. Shavar makel befaneha. Now somebody comes and as an act of service breaks the stick. So he's innovating a new kind of service for this. He's using the stick, which is part of the way this idol is served, but he breaks the stick. Chayav v'ne'eseret. He is guilty of idolatry, and the stick is tikrovet avodah zarah. The stick is now forbidden to have any benefit from, and it can't be batel ever. However, zarak makil lefanea, chayav ve'eina ne'eseret. If he threw the stick in front of the idol, he has performed idolatry, but the stick is not a tikrovet avodah zarah. He's guilty of idolatry, but the stick is not also. Why not? What is the difference? If he broke it, the reason that if he breaks the stick in front of the idol is because it's like a temple action. It's like one of our own services in the Beis HaMikdash. What do? We also break something in order to sacrifice it. We break an animal. We slaughter an animal. So here he's done it with a stick. But the activity is equivalent enough to something that happened in the Beis HaMikdash to make it an act of tikrovet avodah zarah. Zarak nami havi alei ka'in zrika. We throw things in the Beis HaMikdash as well. We throw water on the mizbeach. We throw wine on the mizbeach. We throw blood on the mizbeach. There are cases where the main one, zrikas hadam, we throw blood on the mizbeach. So just as we slaughter not a stick but an animal, and he slaughtered a stick, but still it's considered equivalent, we throw in the Beis HaMikdash, not sticks, we throw blood, but still we throw. Why is that not the same? It's not quite the same, because when you throw blood, the blood scatters, and here the stick is still whole. So that's not really called zrika. Zrika is when you throw something in a way that shatters it, and here there's no shattering. If he broke the stick, that's like zvicha. He's slaughtering the stick, he's killing the stick. If he throws the stick, only if the stick would shatter into pieces would it be a problem. But like this, it's not a problem. Just you get an idea of this, that the action has to be equivalent to something that happens in the Beis HaMikdash. Why is this tikroves avodah zarah? So now we're categorizing tikrovet avodah zarah a little bit more. So tikrovet avodah zarah is an action, is an object used in service of an idol in a way that has equivalence in the Beis HaMikdash. That's tikrovet shel avodah zarah, which is now such a serious thing that this object can never be nullified. It can never be made ordinary and usable again. To understand, now I just spent a lot of time trying to understand that concept. What is it? Why is it so serious if it's an object of service, and why does it have to be something that came from the Beis HaMikdash? And if we use the controversial Rambam, and we've spoken about this Rambam several times before, once recently, how the Tel Zerov explains this Rambam. People attack the Rambam, but the Tel Zerov explains the Rambam is based on a medrash. It's not even the Rambam's own idea. He says in the Moreh Nevuchim, in the Guide for the Perplexed, והיה המנהג המפורסם בעולם כולו שהיו אז רגילים בו והעבודה הכוללת אשר גדלו עליה להקריב מיני בעלי חיים בהיכלותיהם. So there was always a practice of sacrifice. It started with Adam and Noah and Cain and Hevel. We know they brought sacrifices. There's always been sacrifices. And then the idolaters started using it in their places of service. They put up images and would bow to them and sacrifice to them, bring incense. They made temples to the stars and so on. Things that Hashem never allowed, etc. Hashem did not come along and say, stop this practice, because that would have been impossible for humanity to have done. People do what they're accustomed to do, and this has been a custom since the beginning of time. והיה דומה אז כאילו יבוא נביא בזמננו זה שיקרא לעבודת השם ויאמר השם ציווה אתכם שלא תתפללו אליו. Imagine somebody came and said to us, God has said you can't daven. No more praying to God. We couldn't do that. Can't stop praying. It's something so natural in us. What are we going to do? Lo tatsumu, don't fast. Lo tavakshu, fasting, I don't know if we would have such a problem with. But lo tavakshu tzuato be'etzara, don't turn to God when you're in trouble. Everybody turns to God when they're in trouble. How are you going to stop that? אבל תהיה עבודתכם מחשבה מבלתי מעשה, ומפני זה, and just think no actions, we wouldn't like that, ומפני זה השאיר השם מיני העבודות ההם והעתיקם מהיותם לנבראים ולעניינים דמיוניים, שאין המצוות להם לשמו יתברך. And so Hashem transferred the activity, the method of service, from meaningless idolatry to Hashem himself, the way it used to be in the time of Adam and Cain and Hevel and Noach. Just get back to the source. And the Talmud explains, he's not suggesting that Hashem allowed sacrifices as a concession to an idolatrous pagan practice that used to exist in the world. And the Ramban also in the Rambam, there were sacrifices long before there was idolatry in the world. That can't be what why would the Rambam say that? Explains the Tel Zorov. No, he's saying the fact that there have always been sacrifices shows it's built into human nature. It's built into, we're wired that way to serve a God. That's what we do. We serve something bigger than us. And we will always find ways of service. So Hashem says, take that act of service and apply it to Hashem. You want to serve? You need to serve. There's nothing wrong with serving, provided it's lishmo yitbarach. V'tzivanu la'asotan lo yitbarach. V'tzivanu livnot hechal lo. Build a Beis HaMikdash, v'asu li mikdash. V'shiyah mizbeach lishmo. And make a mizbeach for Hashem. Mizbeach adama ta'aseh li. V'shiyuah korban lo. And bring sacrifices to him. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban la Hashem. If you want to bring a sacrifice, bring it to Hashem. V'ishtechavu lo v'shiyaktiru lefanav. And bow to them and bring incense to him. And he warned us not to do these things to any cause other than his, as it says in our pasuk that we're using here, Zoveach le'elokim yocharam bilti la'Hashem levado, lo tishtachaveh lekel acher, v'yifrish kohanim lebeis hamikdash, etc., etc. So Hashem takes this act and says, service is good, provided it's to Hashem. To serve in any other way is working against the very thing that Hashem did. So what did Hashem do? If you look at the evolution of service, it started in the time of Noach and Shem and Cain and Hevel and Adam Arishon. Back to the earliest days of humankind, we served God. We did acts of service to God, including sacrifices. Then we shifted the focus of our service and sacrifice to idolatry. And now Hashem brings us back and says, service and sacrifice, fine, but not idolatry, only to Hashem. So now what happens when an individual takes an action from the Beis HaMikdash, something which we use to serve Hashem, and he uses that in the service of an idol? If he just makes up his own service, so he's innovating, he's doing, it's still idolatry, but it's not the same as a tikrovet shel avodah kochavim. He hasn't taken something which has been designed for service of God and use it for the service of another God and use it for service of idolatry. To actually distort it and take it. You see, we think this is all talking about ancient things and sacrifices, but it applies to us today as well. If a person wants to start a new movement, communism, socialism, okay, he starts a new movement, it works or it doesn't work, and he argues his way with it. But if a person takes a Torah concept and starts a movement based on a Torah concept, and the movement is not al-pi Torah, that's this type of thing. Hashem knows we always want to serve a greater cause, and particularly Jewish people. If they lose their attachment to Yiddishkeit, they find something else to serve. It's the environment, it's the poor Palestinians and the Gazans, it's the black people in Africa. There will always be a cause, something to serve. We need to serve. And Hashem recognizes that He built us that way, that we need to serve. All Hashem warns us is, serve only one. You don't need to serve anything more than it. If you serve Hashem, everything else works out well. Take, for example, the idea of tikkun olam. Become a major word that is used in all sorts of cultures and environments. Tikkun olam. And what does tikkun olam mean out there in the world? All sorts of different things. It's used very often as a tagline for progressive liberal movements. To fix the world. Good, it's fine to fix the world. How do you fix? What do you want the world to look like when it's fixed? It's fine to say fix the world, but fix it back to what? So we say letaken olam b'malchut shaddai. The way you do tikkun olam is to bring Hashem back into the world, and they're using tikkun olam as a way to exclude Hashem from the world. So as to have a kind of a secular environment where you're doing good things and you're doing kindness, but without God in the picture. That's taking a Torah concept and distorting it and using it. That's tikrovet avodah zarah, so to say, in a conceptual sense. To make a new movement is fine. It's just somebody's idea. But to take something from the Torah and build something false on that which comes from the Torah, that's corrupting one of God's. That's tikrovet avodah zarah. To take the object itself, to take the activity itself out of the Beis Hamikdash and to use it in a completely secular environment, or worse, an idolatrous environment, that's tikrovet avodah zarah. There's a beautiful piece on this posik by Rabbi David Lapin. Rabbi David Lapin was the head of the Hildesheimer Institute, the seminar for rabbis in Berlin, which was really a very serious yeshiva that produced a lot of great Talmidei Chachomim. And he was there. I knew one of his Talmidim, who was a Rosh Yeshiva in Kol Torah when I was a young kid, and I was learning in Kol Torah. I was in the first year, and the second year there was a Talmud of Rabbi David Lapin was the Magid Shir. And he says, "Ha'adam no'ad la'avodat boro, va'alav la'akdish atzmo la'avodah zu mirtzono ha'chofshi." A human being is created and dedicated, set up to serve, to dedicate himself to the service of Hashem with free will, choosing to serve Hashem. That's what we're meant to do. But this person who is now setting himself up to serve other gods will be destroyed. But the word cherim, he learns, means yekadesh et Hashem shelo birtzono. He'll sanctify God's name without his willingness. By destroying the idolatry, by in this case actually putting him to death, you're actually elevating Hashem's name. As we said, sometimes doing something destructive is in fact creative. And that's what the Yochoram means. Al yedei ovdono yeh bal kocho lecherim yukdash likidum ha'inyan ha'eloki. This idea of the seriousness of somebody designed for one thing and distorting the design for something else. Taking an act of service of Hashem, distorting it into service of idolatry. Taking an object that is used for service of Hashem and distorting it into the service of idolatry. To be really careful that when we're using ideas of the Torah, we're using them the way the Torah intended them to be used. They're used for the service of Hashem. Because if we serve only Hashem, nothing else, no other human being, no other force, no other movement, no nation, we just serve Hashem. Everything else is covered in that. If we're serving Hashem, we're taking care of people. If we're serving Hashem, we're taking care of the environment. If we're serving Hashem, we're doing that which is right in everything that we do. Just that one idea to know, yes, we were created for service. But what service are we created for? For that of Hashem. If we move away from that and use our drive for service to serve forces other than Hashem, that's Zoveach L'Elohim Yocharam. That Chas v'Sholom means we're bringing our sacrifices to other gods, and that's something we never may do.